Hello, everyone, and welcome to our staff town hall today. It's great to be with you. I'm Hallie Nicholson, HR Strategic Communication and Engagement Manager, and I'll be your moderator for our town hall today. We've got a great group of panelists on hand to provide some updates about our operations during the COVID-19 pandemic and to answer your questions. Some of the questions were submitted during registration, and you can also feel free to use the Q&A window in your Zoom window to submit additional questions for our panelists to answer both on screen and in written answers with our behind the scene panelists. During our time limitation, or due to our time limitation, we will not be able to get to all of your questions today, but we will log the questions as they come in and put the answers on the Return to Learn website. This webinar has live closed captioning available in two ways. First, you can click on the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen and select Show Subtitles, or you can also click on the link that will be pasted into the chat. So now I'd like to introduce Executive Vice Chancellor Elizabeth Simmons for some welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Hallie. It's a great pleasure to help kick off this Return to Learn Town Hall for staff today as we review the latest developments in university operations. The COVID vaccine and returning to campus are on many people's minds, and we will be discussing them as part of today's session and trying to answer your questions. But before we get started with that, I just wanted to thank every one of you, all of our staff, for your teamwork and for your ongoing support of fellow Tritons, whether they be staff colleagues, faculty colleagues, or students on our campus. I've really been impressed by everything that I've seen of your work over the last year and a half, whether on Zoom or those of you who've been working in person. Your dedication, your resilience, your flexibility have enabled the university to uphold our mission during this very difficult time, and also to identify opportunities to further support the broader San Diego community. It's an honor to serve UC San Diego alongside you. Well, we've received numerous questions from staff, and we look forward to addressing as many of them as possible this afternoon. We might not have the answers to every single one of them at our fingertips, and so we'll appreciate your continued patience and flexibility as the public health situation and the regulations evolve. Of course, any question that we can't answer right now, we will be answering through the Return to Learn frequently asked questions pages. So please do keep returning to the RTL website on a routine basis. I think you've all memorized it by now, returntolearn.ucsd.edu, and you'll find the answers to many questions and the latest campus updates there. So now let me return the floor to our host to start the next part of the program. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Elizabeth. That's a great note to get us started on. So I'd now like to welcome the host of our town hall today, Chief Human Resources Officer, Nancy Resnick.
Thank you, Hallie, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. It is great to be here together in our staff town hall. And I want to note that this month marks 1 year since we started our staff town halls. And during the course of this past year with our staff town halls, we've actually had over 13,000 staff town hall attendees, which to me is really remarkable and a testament to how effective this is as a way for us to connect as a staff community. And really, it's your strong participation and engagement with the town halls that make these such a success going forward. So again, thank you for being here. And I think, the staff town halls are one of many examples of innovation and progress that we've seen in our campus since some of us shifted our operations pretty significantly in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We didn't have a regular opportunity prior to the pandemic to connect as a staff community, to bring staff colleagues and campus leaders together in this way. And I think it would have been very challenging to find a physical way of meeting with, over 1,000 attendees up to 1,500 attendees. I think the logistics would have made that very difficult. And the Zoom technology has enabled us to kind of see each other differently and connect in really meaningful and impactful ways. So thank you again for your questions and for participating. And I'd like to also acknowledge that these staff town halls do represent a lot of work and a lot of dedication behind the scenes, as well as those of us you see talking on the screen. We have a very collaborative effort, and we have many colleagues that we work with, including those from OSI, the Operational Strategic Initiatives Group, from RMP, Resource Management and Planning, from Human Resources. Our colleagues from UC San Diego Health are invaluable, of course, and many others. And speaking of excellence and collaboration in our staff community, what you see on the screen is a list of our Exemplary Staff Employee of the Year honorees. We have extraordinary staff at our institution. And we actually expanded our program to honor exemplary staff so that we could issue more awards, given how deserving our staff are. There are, in addition to the honorees themselves, there are many individuals who are nominated as well. And there are many individuals who are are just remarkable in the work that they do. So we have great pride and pleasure in hosting the upcoming Exemplary Staff Employee of the Year award ceremony, which is going to be held next week. And I invite you to attend. I believe we'll be putting the registration information in the chat for you to actually sign up right now if you'd like to do so. And these honorees have been nominated by their peers for demonstrating excellence in a number of areas, including innovation, proactive leadership, relationship building, collaboration, and bringing about significant positive change in support of UC San Diego's mission. They represent as well a breadth and a range of types of positions across the campus and at UC San Diego Health. So a big congratulations to our honorees. And again, you are very welcome to come meet with us virtually for this important celebration. There are so many outstanding staff in our institution. And to echo a little bit of what we heard from our Executive Vice Chancellor, Elizabeth Simmons, it is extraordinary what we've accomplished together as a staff community. We have the great privilege and the great honor of working together in an extraordinary institution and really with extraordinary colleagues. So I have been so impressed and continue to be impressed by the tenacity, the creativity, the resilience that the staff of UC San Diego have demonstrated, and I know will continue to demonstrate, and I'm honored to be your colleague. So with that, let me turn the program over to Hallie so we can get started. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Nancy, and congratulations to the Exemplary Staff Employee of the Year honorees. We're excited to celebrate you next week. So let's get started with our first presenter, Dr. Chip Schooley, Professor of Medicine, to give us an update on the state of the pandemic and the vaccine. So Chip, I'll hand things over to you.
Thanks very much, Hallie. Let me run through a few aspects of the epidemiology just to set the stage for what I was really asked to talk about, the variants and vaccines, because what we're seeing with the variants and vaccines is what's driving the epidemiology. You've seen this slide before, but the point I want to make here isn't the overall slope of the curve over the course of the last year, but the uptick we've been seeing in the US over the last 2 to 3 weeks. Next slide. And this has been seen in California as well, but next slide. Nothing like what we're seeing in states like Arkansas, Missouri, Florida, and Louisiana, where the vaccine uptake rates have been so much lower than they are here in California. So a large amount of the increased number of cases, morbidity and mortality in the US over the course of the last 3 to 4 weeks has been driven by states in which the vaccine uptake rates are the lowest. Next slide. And shown here on this slide, you can see hot zones, so-called, in areas like southern Missouri, all throughout Arkansas, Louisiana, northern Florida, Alabama, Georgia, places where vaccines have been lower. Here in San Diego, next, we've also seen an uptake in the increase in the number of daily cases. We were running down in the range of about 100 a day, and some days fewer. Lately, we've been seeing 300 to 500 cases a day as we've seen the Delta variant, as I'll discuss in a minute, move in. Now, the number of hospitalizations has begun to increase as well, but not as steeply as the number of cases. And this is for 2 reasons. The first, of course, is that it takes a while for a case to become ill enough for people to be hospitalized and to end up contributing to the death rate. But the other reason is that many of the infections are so-called breakthrough cases in which we're having mild disease that aren't leading to hospitalizations, but are still counting in the case counts and contributing to the epidemiology. Next. So what we have right now is essentially 2 epidemics among the unvaccinated populations, both here in San Diego and nationally. We have people who are experiencing the same spectrum of illness we've been seeing since the beginning of the epidemic. And And this is the group of people who account for nearly all, but not all, of the hospitalizations and deaths. We have a vaccinated population that is primarily asymptomatic or having mild infections when they do get infected. Occasionally, people will have severe illness, and when they do, it's usually in someone who has underlying immunodeficiency conditions or who have other risk factors for COVID. But we think that their transmission rate, although not zero, is lower than people in the unvaccinated population. And what you see in any given location in the country, in any given community in the country, is a function of the mix of vaccinated and unvaccinated people. In places where the unvaccinated rates are higher, we see a lot more illness. In the places where the vaccinated population is higher, we're seeing less illness, but we're still seeing breakthrough cases that are showing up in our case count. Next. And the point I want to make here is that the entire US is part of the overall epidemiology of this disease. And to the extent that the vaccinated population is getting infected and having breakthrough cases and capable of transmitting, it also is contributing to the ongoing transmission of virus to the unvaccinated population and to people who've been vaccinated but didn't respond to the vaccine. Next. Now let's talk a bit about viral variation and the variants. This looks like a complex slide. It looks, I guess, like a San Diego, like a LA freeway map. But if you start on the left side in the lower panel, you can see there, these are viral sequences obtained over the last year and a half. And you can see that initially there was a single viral sequence. And then as time moves on, there is more and more viral diversity. Each one of these lines on this dendrogram is a new viral daughter strain. And over time, more and more of these daughter strains have emerged, and some of them turn out to be more transmissible, and some of them more pathogenic, more able to cause disease in humans than the parent strains. Next slide. Now, we used to talk about strains from the standpoint of geography. We now talk about them using the Greek alphabet. And what we used to call the British strain is now called the alpha strain. This is the first variant that we knew about, and it is one that is about 1.5 times as transmissible as the strain we had here in San Diego a year ago. And it's more transmissible because it's able to infect individual cells more easily. It sticks to the cell surface better. And when it gets in, it grows more rapidly. And so it grows up to a high level in people and is transmitted quickly to other people, enabling it to spread in the population. 2 other strains came along, beta and gamma, the next 2 letters in the Greek alphabet, initially recognized in South Africa and Brazil. These strains combined more infectivity with the ability to evade the immune response induced by the vaccines that were made initially looking at the viral strains we started with. So these, in addition to being more transmissible, are also a bit less susceptible to the weaker vaccines. And by that, I mean the adenovirus vaccines and some of the killed vaccines made in other parts of the world than the strains we used to deal with. And then kind of taking some of the best or worst features of each of these 3 variants, we now have the Delta strain, which is circulating around the world and in the US now. Next. It is now, and you can see in this tan, these bars over time in this stacked histogram, you can see over time that tan bar, which was the alpha variant, you can see spread. What's now happening is this one's being pushed out of the way by the Delta variant. And now we think that 80% of the overall infections in the US are likely the Delta variant. And that's, we think, true here in the US. Now, next. So what's driving what we're seeing in the US? 2 things. One is the Delta variant, which, as I said, is more infectious than the Alpha variant, which is the British strain. And that strain, in turn, is about 1.5 times as infectious as the strains we used to deal with a year ago. So taken together, we're seeing a virus that's now almost 3 times as infectious as what we were dealing with a year ago. And so that any leak that we have in our epidemiological measures or our vaccine measures is going to be taken advantage of very easily by this Delta variant. And we also are seeing concentrations of unvaccinated people within specific locations and demographics. And this is where the epidemic is exploding. We're often seeing these people who don't want to be vaccinated are also the same people who are concerned about masks, and the virus is taking full advantage of this. The other thing that's happened is this summer, as things were getting better, masks came off, we're traveling, we're mixing, and we're celebrating the light at the end of the tunnel. We still have a light out there, but the tunnel may be longer than we thought. We're going to have to, I think, be creative to help us get from where we are now to where we need to be. Next. What about vaccination? San Diego is doing better than most parts of the country. We have nearly 80% of people over the age of 12 who've received at least one shot of a 2-shot series of vaccination. About 70% are fully vaccinated, and this is really a great start. Now, one thing we're learning about these, about the vaccinated population and the breakthrough strains is that although the infections themselves are much less severe and people are much less likely to land in the hospital, some people are able to shed enough virus to transmit it to other people. And that's one reason why some of the advice people have been giving in the past about, well, if you get to 75%, we'll have herd immunity, you'll be protected, is bad advice, because even at this 79% vaccinated level, there's enough virus being transmitted by both the vaccinated and the unvaccinated population that unvaccinated people are not protected with this concept of herd immunity. So if you're waiting to get vaccinated to get to herd immunity, it's not a good strategy for trying to protect yourself. And finally, last slide. The vaccines available now are the messenger RNA vaccines made by Pfizer and Moderna. These vaccines are the ones that we're using most in the US right now. They, in my view, provide a stronger level of immunity than the viral vector vaccine made by Johnson & Johnson. They are generally well tolerated. The main side effect we've seen is that in some younger people, there is a myocarditis, which means inflammation of the heart. These have generally been self-limiting. To my knowledge, have been no deaths, and that people recover from this. It's occurring, the number of people who have this is in the hundreds, while the number of people vaccinated is in the tens of millions. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine has been associated with some rare clotting abnormalities, more often in women. And recently with Guillain-Barré syndrome, again, cases in the hundreds with vaccine numbers are given over 10 million. So the frequencies are low. We need to look for them. We need to be aware of them. But compared to the complications of the disease itself, these are really complications that put these vaccines as among the safest that we have in the US or in the world. So from the standpoint of where we are at UC San Diego, we are seeing a few cases on the campus, 1 or 2 cases among our students. About 2/3 of the students with these cases are breakthrough cases. We've seen no student who's needed to be hospitalized or had severe disease. So we're seeing what we're seeing nationally. The campus remains a safe place with our highly vaccinated population. We're continuing to monitor everything very carefully with daily meetings, looking at the wastewater, looking at shedding, and we still are quite convinced that we are working in one of the safest places in the US. Let me turn this back to you, Hallie, and I look forward to comments and questions and discussion with the audience later today.
All right, thanks a bunch, Chip. So next up, I'd like to welcome my colleague, Terry Winbush, Senior Director of Labor Relations and Employee Relations, who will give us an update about the UC vaccine policy and our return to campus. So Terry, take it away.
Thank you, Hallie. And just to follow on everything that Chip said, I know there are a lot of questions about the UC vaccine mandate. So as many of you know, the University of California Office of the President issued the final COVID-19 vaccination policy on July 15th, just last week. So that policy actually explains a lot of information about the requirements to either be fully vaccinated or to have a documented exception or deferral on file in order to come on to UC property once the implementation date is effective in September. And more to come on that so that you know exactly the timelines and process to get in your information regarding your vaccine status so that you know how to operate going forward. One of the things that you may notice if you've taken the time to read the entirety of the policy and the FAQs that follow the policy, and then the separate document of FAQs for employees and the additional separate document of FAQs for students, you'll see information about locations may determine methods of having folks identified with their vaccine status. So the thing that we wanted to make sure that you all knew is location is not department or work unit or something like that, but location is literally UC San Diego campus or UC San Diego Health. So leadership over UC San Diego. So our chancellor and our vice chancellors will be making the ultimate determinations about how vaccine status will be uploaded, et cetera, and then how individuals will know or not know the vaccine status of their colleagues, coworkers, students, instructors, et cetera. So more to come on that information. We will keep you all posted. Please review those FAQs for employees, including things like, does this final policy require vaccination for our employees or only those who work on site? So the short answer to that question is we encourage everyone to be fully vaccinated for all of the reasons that Chip expressed just a few moments ago, and for the safety of your family and the community, et cetera. Especially for those who cannot get vaccinated, you being vaccinated is the way to really stop this, this virus from spreading. But if you're thinking to yourself, well, I won't be on campus all the time, so will this policy really apply to me? It will for anything you have to do on any UC property. So even if it's just a one-off time that you'd be coming to campus or to a UC facility to do work, you will have to be either vaccinated or have a documented exception or deferral on file. So keep that in mind to make sure that you do what you need to do to comply with the policy once we roll out some of those implementation details. But review the additional FAQs, such as the ones we have captured here. How do I demonstrate proof? We will provide you that information. Who maintains that documentation? We'll let you know that as well. And what are the consequences of non-compliance for employees? How will these be enforced? So we will be rolling out a lot of information related to that, but just know that it will be an absolute requirement that you meet the rules of the policy and the implementing processes that we share out in the coming weeks. So stay tuned for all of that information. Next slide. As it relates to the return to campus, the flexible work arrangement policy, we received so many comments, and I'd like to thank you all out there in the community for sharing information or interpretation and ways that we could shore up some of the language. And we are actively working on that behind the scenes to get that finalized and the final policy out. Many of you saw the communication from our CHRO, Nancy Resnick, regarding the work location status form. Some of you may be thinking, oh my goodness, is this another thing I have to do? Why are these things? But just so you know, it takes about 45 seconds on the top end to fill in the work location status form. And some of you may be saying, well, why now? If I'm going to be getting a changed work modality potentially from my supervisor in the coming weeks, why wouldn't I just wait? And the reason is we need to have this information sooner rather than later to meet all of our regulatory requirements. And like I said, it takes 45 seconds. So 45 seconds now and another 45 seconds in September is a sum total of 1.5 minutes. And I just ask that you please give us that time because we really need that information for a number of our requirements. In reporting information about employee work location. Additionally, as you all know, the ultimate goal is to give everyone 30 days notice of what their work modality will be, if there will be a change in their work modality, work arrangement, come fall readiness September 1 time. So to the extent that there will be a change, we're expecting you to start receiving those communications. If you're not already one of those areas that's already returned to site within the next couple weeks. So again, as I mentioned at the last town hall, if you haven't heard the information yet from your supervisor or leadership, don't fret. It's coming, and it's coming very soon. So expect information over the next couple of weeks so that you can know what your fall ready plan is. And as far as the next steps in the process, we're continuing to support the vice chancellors and the executive vice chancellor with the return to campus process through their frameworks and their project teams who are leading it under the guise of their philosophy for their portfolio. So we're providing support and information and templates and all of those things, but ultimately the decisions are centered around the operational needs for each work area. So please know more information is coming, hang in there, and operational needs will drive this all. And within that, many of you probably are thinking, well, I've been working off-site really successfully all this time, but understand that once more people start to return on site, most people aren't off site anymore. And so there will be a shift in the needs for vibrancy on the campus, for working with colleagues who are on campus, for meeting the needs of our on-campus constituents like students, et cetera. So be patient, show your supervisors some grace, know that this won't be perfect. We're doing the best that we can. Keep the lines of communication open, and we will keep looking at this to try and make it best for our operations, and then for our people who, like you all out there, are doing the great work of keeping us going. So thanks, everybody. And Hallie, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right, thanks a bunch, Terry. So on the topic of return to campus, at previous events, we have showcased what some the return to campus plans have looked like for some different areas across campus, including recently IPPS. So today, I would now like to welcome University Librarian Eric Mitchell for a spotlight on Geisel Library and their plans for reopening and some of the innovative things they're doing. So Eric, take it away.
Thanks so much, Hallie. I'm really glad to have the opportunity to share more about what the library's been working on and our plans for the fall, and some thoughts about flexible work planning. So throughout the past academic year, we've offered a physically distant study hall at the biomedical library. We've offered curbside pickup in partnership with campus transportation services, and of course, a whole range of kind of digital and hybrid services. Just about a month ago, we reopened part of Geisel Library for study, and we're seeing just a lot of use by students on campus. Right now, there's easily 75 or 80 students in our library. In preparation for the fall, in leveraging the flexible work planning process, we're working to increase staff here on site and reconfiguring our library spaces with the goal of fully reopening the biomedical library on September 7th to coincide with the start of the fall quarter for the medical school, and fully opening Geisel Library on September 13th. This is going to include access to the library's physical collections and resources like the data and GIS lab, as well as full support for our partners like the Teaching and Learning Commons, Audrey's, and the Triton Transfer Hub. I can't even begin to express my appreciation to all the library staff who have been working on site actually since the very beginning of this back in March 2020 to do work that couldn't have been done remotely. And I'm equally grateful, of course, for all the hard work of our staff and student employees who have been working at home supporting our faculty and students for the last 18 months. If you'd like more details on our plans, please do reach out to us via our website, library.ucsd.edu. And I want to talk a little bit more about flexible work planning in a moment, but first I'd love to highlight two successes from the last year that illustrate how we're thinking about flexible work. And so next slide, please. So the first success I want to mention is how we're building on lessons from the past year to put digital services at the center of our in-person service model. In the last year, we've invested a lot in digital books and journals and instructional materials. We were able to activate emergency access to over 13 million digital books while our physical collections had been unavailable. We also re-envisioned how we provide services like research support, how we answer student questions, and how we support classes through instruction. And as we pivoted to being a digital first library, we thought a lot about how students ask for help, and based on that designed and launched a new platform that better enables self-support through knowledge base articles, that gives students easy access to chat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and helps connect students with one of our 60 librarians for in-depth research assistance. In addition to putting technology in place to streamline that experience, behind the scenes, we've brought together the teams responsible for answering all those questions and have been working on improving our response and referral process. We have seen incredible use of the platform over the last year, and as we're planning to restart in-person services, our digital platform and our new approach to service will help us serve students and faculty equally, regardless of whether or not they're in the building, somewhere else on campus, or even somewhere else in the world. And additionally, this approach is really helping us think about flexibility as we plan for on-site work, as staff now have additional digital channels that they can use to interact with students and faculty and don't necessarily need to sit at a public service desk to do this work. So next slide, please. So the second success I want to mention is our collaboration with Campus Transportation Services for curbside pickup. Back in 2020, Josh Kavanaugh reached out to us to talk about his vision for a campus-wide curbside pickup service. And we had been running our own program just for a few weeks, and we're learning what a big undertaking it was. Josh's program helped us scale up our ability to deliver with adding hours and actually sustain a pickup program that we've been using to distribute books and other things to students and faculty. And so we're so happy about this. From what we've seen, curbside pickup actually is an important part of any retail experience now. And we're really excited to continue this collaboration with transportation services. So, looking back at flexible work or thinking about flexible work, working with Josh's group actually has helped us streamline our workflow by batch processing these pickup requests without having to deal with all the hours of in the public service aspects of that additional work. So next slide. So as I wrap up, I'd like to comment on how these two successes have helped us think about the implementation of flexible work plans in the library. With around 7 million visitors in a typical year, I know that when Geisel reopens, we're going to be incredibly busy. We're open 24 hours a day during the weekdays, and including the biomedical library, we have to plan for a couple hundred hours of public building access each week. This is really important to us because being a place for community is one of our driving strategic priorities, and we're really excited to have students back in the library. A little earlier, I mentioned our digital first service approach as the foundation on which we're rebuilding in-person services. And as we've been re-implementing on-site workflows, we've been asking the question kind of what work is done best within the library and what work can be done from another location. From this analysis, we're beginning to see that we think around 75 or 80% of our library staff actually will have some type of flexible work arrangement, often flexible in terms of location for a day or two a week, but we're also experimenting with flexible hours for on-site roles. We, of course, did find that there's some roles that can only be fulfilled on-site, and the last 18 months has really helped us learn where those needs are. To define our flexible work plan, we've supported our managers in having individual conversations with staff members about programmatic needs, and we've been discussing how we'll assess and adjust our plan over time. We've already had opportunities, in fact, to review and adjust our plan in Geisel. A great lesson learned from this past week was how we could partner with the Triton Health Ambassador Program run out of Student Affairs. And I'm so grateful for the help they've been providing in staffing our public spaces. Throughout the fall, we'll be using regular check-ins on program operations, as well as individual meetings with managers and staff to review and adjust as needed. And I know, again, we'll learn a lot as we start off our quarter. So let me stop there. Thanks so much again for this opportunity to share more about what we're focusing on and our approach to flexible work. So Hallie, back to you.
All right, thanks a bunch, Eric. That was really interesting and such a cool overview to learn about some innovations you've had and kind of looking at centering everything on recognizing how important a library is to the student experience. So really interesting overview of your planning. So thank you so much for sharing with that. So also on the topic of returning to work, on a slightly different aspect of that topic, I'd like to welcome Dr. Brian McNutt from our Faculty and Staff Assistance Program. Brian's going to share a few tips with us relating to maybe some anxiety that might come up as we consider returning to work and making changes in our routines. So Brian, take it away.
Thanks, Hallie. Really appreciate it. And good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to join you today and just offer a few thoughts and perspectives about managing anxiety and returning to campus. We all know that the process of returning to campus for our primary work in many respects is provoking a lot of different feelings among folks across campus. And for some, the anticipation of returning to work on campus has really created a lot of anxiety for a variety of different reasons. So I'd like to offer just a few tips that might be helpful just to keep in mind for maintaining perspective and also finding ways to utilize the emotional resources that you can to help navigate the changes ahead. The first one is to think about how you can be gentle with yourself and realistic with your emotional expectations. Change and uncertainty are naturally anxiety provoking. And anxiety can actually be a healthy signal that we're anticipating something that may require a little bit more attention or a little bit more resources from ourselves. So being anxious about returning to work on campus is actually not a sign that you're emotionally incapable of dealing with the change. It's just a sign that you're actually anticipating a change of something that is still a bit unfamiliar and uncertain. And that is completely normal to feel. The second thing that might be helpful to keep in mind is remain focused on what is rather than what if. Anxiety really tends to operate by trying to forecast and predict things that might happen in the future, which is basically our brain's way of just trying to help us survive something that we think might be problematic. And this, of course, can have its advantages, like helping us get organized and prepared. But it can also be rather counterproductive if we're just solely focused on that future imagined scenario. There can be an infinite number of what if scenarios that we can get anxious about. So a helpful counterbalance to this is really refocusing our attention on what is actually happening right now. What am I actually experiencing right now? What are the actual conditions of the situation that I'm in right now? And this is where mindfulness and practice of remaining present focus can really help us deal with an infinite number of anxious concerns about an uncertain future. The third thing that might be helpful to keep in mind is pay attention to the real evidence of what makes your experience safe and secure. For the past year and a half, most of us have had to go through a process of learning a different way of judging what is safe and unsafe, especially when thinking about COVID. And now with the rollout of the vaccine, returning to in-person social situations, we're all facing another adjustment of relearning how to judge what is safe and unsafe. So paying attention to the actual real evidence of what makes a situation safe enough to engage in it can really help us manage our anxiety. The fourth thing is think about how you can pace yourself in your engagement with others. Think about how you can go slow and go small. Just like we're relearning what it is to be safe or unsafe when it comes to COVID, many of us are also relearning how to engage with other people in person again. A lot of people are experiencing social anxiety and awkwardness in a way that they're not accustomed to feeling. And the important thing to remember about this is that social confidence really builds with more exposure. It's kind of like a muscle. And the more that it's gradually used more and more without overexerting it, the stronger it becomes, the more flexible it becomes. So think about how you can gradually reacclimate to social engagement at work. There's no need to push yourself too hard or too fast. Going slow, going small, like engaging with a smaller number of people, can really help your mind just gradually. The fifth thing I would suggest is communicate and speak up if you've got concerns or questions. Anxiety is often something that can leave us feeling very helpless. And using your voice to speak up can be an important step to help you feel just a little bit more empowered. Asking questions with a trusted colleague, expressing concerns to your supervisor. These can help create more solution-focused conversations and might also help elicit a little bit more information. And information is always helpful with managing anxiety. It's okay to say, I'm not really sure how to do this, or it's okay to ask people what they're comfortable with. That really normalizes uncertainty and awkwardness that most of us feel. The sixth thing I would suggest is focus on what you can control and the choices you can make to help yourself feel a little bit more at ease. This is really the key to dealing with anxiety, knowing what we can control and what we can't. And even in the midst of all these uncertainties returning to work on campus may bring about, there are still a lot of choices that each of us have along the way. Think about what these choices might be that could help you feel a little bit more ease with your work. Maybe that's speaking up and asking for more information about how the day-to-day operations are going to change, or initiating a conversation with your supervisor about creative options with your work engagement. Or maybe it's just taking time to chat with a trusted colleague about your concerns so you just don't feel so alone anymore in your anxiety. The last thing I would encourage us to keep in mind is remember that you can adapt to change and you are resilient. As Nancy had mentioned at the top of our staff town hall, if there's anything that our campus community has proven throughout this past year and a half, it's really how resilient we are. And each of you has been faced with some challenge of adjustment and adapting to this change in your life during this time. Consider how you showed that resilience in adapting to that change. And think about how you can draw upon that same resilience to help you face this next change that's ahead. And remember, your faculty and staff assistance program is always available for you here along the way. Don't be shy to reach out for support. Thanks, everybody. And Hallie, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Brian, for those your awesome insight and tips for us. So before we move into our Q&A portion, I'd like to invite Vice Chancellor and Chief Financial Officer Pierre Huillier to join us for our final update. So Pierre, take it away.
Thank you very much, Hallie. And it's less of an update and more of a note of thanks for Nancy, because I believe it's our last town hall as a Chief Human Resource Officer. These town halls are very much the product of her work. And I just wanted to say thank you to Nancy. She'll be retiring from her position on August the 2nd. She'll still be working with me and advise me through the balance of the year. And I'm grateful for that, because we still have a lot going on in HR. But the one thing I wanted to say is that Nancy, and I think you heard the passion in her voice, has been a very strong advocate for the staff throughout her time at UC San Diego. I think that has been particularly important through the pandemic, because the pandemic, if anything, has shown the critical role that our staff plays at UC San Diego. And I think amongst all the constituents of the campus, there is a level of appreciation that I think is much higher than what we had before. I think Nancy has been also working very, very closely with the Staff Association and working very strongly on engagement, communication. I mean, these town halls are her weekly newsletters or monthly newsletters are an example of the importance of keeping all of you engaged and aware of what's going on the campus. And last but not least, Nancy has been a fierce advocate of the anti-racism work and in my portfolio for the inclusive excellence work as well, working very closely with our DI partners. So I'm very grateful for the work that she has done, for her impact at UC San Diego, for the momentum that we have in HR with our leadership. And Nancy, I just wanted to say thank you very much on behalf of myself, the leadership team, and the staff at large.
All right, thank you very much, Pierre. So with that, we will now move on to the Q&A portion of our event today. And we've got about 25 minutes, 30 minutes set aside for Q&A. So I'd like to welcome our Q&A panelists join me on screen, and we'll get started. So the questions that we're going to be answering today, some of them were submitted in advance during registration. And as you may be able to see, many of them were also submitted during the event today. One cool thing about this format that we're in, this Zoom format, is that we can answer so many of these questions in writing. So if you haven't done so, I encourage you to check out the Q&A box and scroll through those. You might find your exact question has already been answered by one of our experts. So before we get started with our Q&A, I do want to introduce one person who we didn't hear from the presentations, and I just don't want to move along without introducing. So Steve Jackson, Associate Vice Chancellor for Resource Management and Planning, is with us today to help answer some questions. So thanks you for being with us today, Steve. So let's get started with our first question. Vaccines and COVID are obviously a hot topic right now, which is why we are here. So Chip, I'm going to send this one your way. This person says, thank you for the overview you provided about the Delta and other variants. How worried should we be for these? What guidelines should vaccinated employees follow when not at work?
That's a great question. I can tell you what I'm doing now. I am generally wearing a mask when I'm indoors around other people. Right now, it's not so much for me, but to try to prevent the virus from having an opportunity to use me as another mode to move on to someone else. I'm vaccinated. If I get infected, I'm expecting either not to be symptomatic and not know I'm infected, or to have mild symptoms and possibly confuse it with the flu or the sniffles, which is what we're finding among the students. A lot of the time the story is, gee, I thought I had the flu or the sniffles. I didn't think much about it, but after a couple of days, I thought I would get tested and it turned out to be COVID. That's kind of what most of us should expect if we have symptoms associated with infection after being vaccinated. And the main reason that I wear a mask is so that I'm not a place the virus can replicate and get onto other people and continue to evolve. I don't wear a mask when I'm out walking the dog. I don't wear a mask when I'm pumping gas and doing things that are around other people, but I think it's a good practice just to continue to try as a community to throw a wet blanket on the virus with as much of it as circulating in San Diego and elsewhere.
Great, that's super practical advice. Thank you, Chip. All right, Pierre, this next question is for you. This attendee asks, with the increase in cases of the COVID-19 Delta variant, is there discussion about postponing the repopulation of campus?
So maybe I want to provide a little bit of context first and kind of remind everybody of Dr. Scole's presentation earlier in the town hall today. And but the first statement is everything that we do from the beginning of the pandemic has been driven by data and by science. And we still do that today. So we meet every week. We look at the dashboards, at the status of the pandemic, and we keep updating the guidelines. What everybody needs to keep in mind as well is the campus right now is in a pretty good space. We have a very high vaccination rate. I believe it's 76% first dose and 71% fully vaccinated, and that will still go up with the mandate. And vaccinated folks are much better protected. They can still carry the virus, but as we heard, the impact of the symptoms is much lower. So we're in a fairly good shape. What we need to accept is the fact that we will still live with, I think, the COVID for a while, and we just need to kind of respond to that and make evidence-based decision and follow the business needs. So the approach at this stage is a return to campus continues. What we have decided though is that we would keep the masking mandate indoors unless you're alone in your office for the time being. And remember the Swiss cheese model, right? We have testing in place, we have wastewater testing, we have the mandate indoors, and we have a lot of vaccinated folks. And we believe that at this time, that's the right approach. So at this time, we're still returning to campus progressively, defining the new normal 2.0 by September 1st. And if we need to adjust because things go in the wrong direction, we will. We have done that in the past. It's pretty easy to kind of switch back to remote work. But at this time, we are staying on track. And again, we are measuring all the metrics on a daily basis and making policy decisions on a weekly basis. So.
All right, thank you, Pierre. So sort of, I think a good follow-up to this. Steve, this question is for you. What safety precautions has the campus put in place for people returning to busy buildings and offices?
Thank you, Hallie, and appreciate the question and the opportunity to participate in today's staff town hall. And please know that all the information I'm going to be providing here in a second with the laundry list of all the items is available on the RMP and FM website. So I invite everyone to please visit that site to learn more. So as far as the safety precautions and measures that have been put in place for the campus, RMP has been busy doing the following. Self-sanitation. All campus core buildings have sanitizer stations installed at all of the main entrances, and FM will continue to monitor the soap and paper towel supply in all the restrooms to ensure that individuals can continue to wash their hands in accordance with the CDC recommendations. Touch-free entrances. All FM has completed the installation of the touchless door entries for all major core-funded building entrances, as well as they've been busy installing the hand-free water faucet and soap dispensers in many of the restrooms across the campus. Building ventilation. FM continues to maximize the flow of outside air and ventilation into all the campus buildings to the greatest extent possible based on the environmental controls within those buildings. They've retrofitted over 95% of the campus core funded buildings with the MERV 14 filters, which are the hospital grade filters. And they continue to provide the comprehensive preventative maintenance with the cleaning and disinfecting of all the building air handling system components. So that's ongoing. Also the building water. Please know that FM has continued to clean, treat, and test the water throughout the pandemic in all the building closed and open loop systems to ensure that it's safe for consumption. And then finally, building cleanliness. FM Building Services has continued to maintain the buildings in line with our published blink frequencies. And we've expanded that support to include the disinfecting of all the high traffic and touch point areas, including the door handles, elevator buttons, break rooms, water fountains, etc., on a daily, if not more frequent basis. So just as campus staff are beginning to return, please know that you can contact facilities management either through the email work service ticket or through their work service number 858-534-2930, which is also on the website. If you come across any issues or you want to request additional cleaning, that's an available option. But thanks for that opportunity to list all that good stuff.
All right, thank you, Steve. Definitely sounds very comprehensive. Lots of work going on to keep our campus healthy and safe. Great. So Pierre touched on this briefly, but we got a lot of questions about masks. So Terry, I'm going to send this question your way. There are a lot of questions about mask requirements for working on campus. The question is, when will we be able to work on campus without masks? Do we have to be masked if we meet indoors?
Yes, you currently have to be masked if you are meeting indoors. When you will be able to be unmasked will be dictated by this lovely pandemic. We as Pierre noted, we have weekly meetings. We have meetings multiple times during the week. We have several task forces that, thank you, Dr. Sosha, Dr. Schooley, for being a part of all of these various meetings. We get to see them about 67 or 87 times per week to talk through these things, just to make sure that we're up to date on everything that you all need to know and any changes or precautions that you need to make differently as we navigate through this. But right now, masking is required indoors. Practice those other safety precautions and get vaccinated if you are not already fully vaccinated.
All right, thanks, Terry. So on the same topic, Angela, what can you share about masking for students? Will students be required to wear masks starting in the fall quarter? And if so, how are you going to enforce that?
So I think the masking will be for all of our campus citizens, and the behaviors will be the same for employees and students. The virus doesn't really know who's shedding it and moving it around. So we'll have consistency in that approach because that makes the most scientific sense. Masking behavior is actually hard to monitor. I think we all have to acknowledge that. This is going to require a personal decision to care for each other and oneself by masking. And we'll be coming up with tools to help with that. But there's no perfect place to watch every person every minute. So we need to get a culture of caring and masking because it's the right thing to do. And we'll keep the guidelines, we'll keep updating, as everyone has said. We're watching this really closely.
Thank you, Angela. The name of the game today does seem to be remembering that it's an iterative process, that we are looking at the data, that we are continually having conversations and making adjustments as we need to. So definitely a good thing to remember. Chip, I'm going to send this question your way. This attendee says, the vaccine is mandated but isn't fully FDA approved. Is that a concern? And when will we know more about FDA approval?
The FDA has been a bit of a black box. I think many of us expected them to act more quickly, and it's not clear, what the delay has been. They are obviously going through this extremely carefully. We have very few vaccines on the market that already have had 130 million people receive them, followed as closely as this, that haven't received full approval. So it's hard to know what their full approval timeline will be, but I basically think that the safety profile is really extremely good, and I don't think there'll be any surprises about the full approval when it comes. I think they are sensitive to the fact that people have been hearing, one of the things people hear is, oh, this was warp speed, steps were skipped, want to make sure everything is safe. I don't trust the clinical trials. I think they want to make sure that everybody knows they've looked very carefully at every single rock and under it before they give them full approval.
All right, thanks, Chip. And I think that's a good transition to this next question I see that's come in. So knowing that there's a lot of information swirling around about the vaccine, people are getting a lot of different ways. How can we best combat vaccine disinformation among staff and in our community? So I wonder, maybe Nancy, if you want to share kind of from the employee and interacting with each other standpoint, then of course, either Chip or Angela, I'd love to know kind of from your medical perspective. So Nancy, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, thanks, Hallie. That's a really important question, I think. And it's one I've given some thought to. So if we think about, and I go back to what Pierre said, we're proceeding in all respects here based on data and science. We are, quite frankly, we are a powerhouse institution, and we're so fortunate to have, powerhouse colleagues, Dr. Schooley, Dr. Sosha, and others on the UC San Diego Health side, who they know this stuff. These are the experts, not only in the nation, but globally. So we as employees are actually extremely fortunate. We're hearing information from people who really, really know about this complicated set of scientific and kind of evidence-based, critical information. So what I have tried to do in just talking with, people in my community, neighbors, friends, is actually say, I know this to be true because I heard this from Chip Schooley. And, I'll say a little bit about how authoritative that voice is. And similarly, other of our colleagues, we sort of have our ear to the ground. And the credibility of the information that we get, I think is just, it's sort of, it's impeccable. So how can we convey to people that we know who have, vaccine hesitancy about that? I think a good way to approach that, at least one that I have tried, is really by kind of sharing information that is being shared with us, and sharing kind of the good fortune of being privy to such a high quality of, really informed expert information from our campus. And I know that might not yield 100%, success rate, but I have found it to be, people will pause and they may not have realized that, and so I think we are in a position of, we are getting great information, updated, and, kind of a constant stream of excellent information that we can rely upon, and maybe we can help others in our community rely upon as well.
Thank you, Nancy. Yeah, and I'll open it up to Angela if you wanted to chat.
Yeah, I think the other part is the perception that herd immunity was going to get us out of this. And when we crossed over a certain number of people being vaccinated, it would all just disappear. The variants have taught us that that is not going to be the answer. The fastest way out of this is for everybody who can medically be vaccinated to be vaccinated. That is our best chance of slowing and stopping this virus. And that we're learning that, the vaccinated community is going to do better. They're going to much less likely to acquire infection. They're going to have much less severe disease, but some of them are going to get infections and there may be transmission. And therefore the vulnerable who can't vaccinate or are immunosuppressed are going to be at risk for serious illness and deaths. And if we want to return to the most normal world, we got to get everybody vaccinated. Herd immunity, there's no magic number that's going to get us out there. And I think a lot of people were under the impression if everybody else does it, I don't have to do it and I'll be fine. It's not the case. And if you're not vaccinated, you could get very sick, even if you're a young person and a healthy person. We got to keep that in mind. The virus gets stronger. I don't know, Chip, if you want any more to
Call from 760.
All right, thank you, Angela. I think that's definitely a reminder of what you said earlier.
I think you said it well. I don't think there's anything to add to that. I think there are, there's a whole range of reasons that people haven't been vaccinated. Some of it is, it hadn't been convenient to do it yet. A lot of efforts are made, including late vaccination times, for example, on campus, people have late shifts, trying to get the vaccines out to local drugstores, vaccine events at churches and schools where people are comfortable going. Some people are reluctant because of the EUA issue. I understand that. I don't see it myself as a medically significant issue. Some people are concerned about long-term side effects that we don't know about and won't know about it for years. Again, I think the risk of that is extremely low, and we know what the risk over the short term is of allowing COVID to continue to spread around. And then finally, some people, it's become a political issue for some, and I don't really know how to diffuse that because it's so many things that we accept ourselves as being true or not accepted as facts by others, and it's just hard to dislodge some of those feelings. So there may be some people who, no matter what facts are presented, are not going to be vaccinated because they've been told that the vaccines are bad, and we'll have to try to take care of them when they get sick. We'll have to try to work around them in terms of the virus spreading to other people, but it's a real concern from the standpoint of getting us to the end of this epidemic.
Thanks all, really good insight all around on that. So Terry, in your update, you talked about the UC vaccine policy a little bit. So here are a few questions related to that coming your way. When will the vaccination exemption process be available and how will it work? Will UC San Diego allow special accommodations like remote work for unvaccinated employees?
So we are fast and furiously working on the process behind the scenes. And as soon as we have the details of that process, we will send it out to the broader community. So stay tuned. We will keep you posted. As it relates to special accommodations to work from home. So I will say this in the way that I've been saying it, and then I will say it as it relates to that question. People's work arrangements are determined by operational needs. So as it relates to whether or not someone will have a work arrangement that's associated with something associated with the vaccine mandate, the work arrangement is not dependent on the vaccine mandate. The work arrangement is dependent on the operational needs. And so within that, if a person, for example, does not want to be vaccinated, does not otherwise meet an exception or a deferral under the mandate, and they want to work from home as a way to sort of circumvent the mandated requirements, that will all be dependent upon whether operationally the supervisor already had anticipated a full remote work as an option for that person and not vice versa. So it won't be dependent on that person's desires or preferences. It will really be dependent on what the operational needs are and then working from there. So I know that's a large question for a lot of folks, but working from home is not a way to circumvent the vaccine mandate. So that's another simpler way of saying it.
All right, thank you for that answer, Terry. And also just a reminder to people, more information to come, and read your emails and keep an eye out for those details, and we'll share them as they become available. So this next question I think would go to either one of our medical experts here with us today. If a vaccinated person has a mild case of COVID, should they and their contacts do the 14 days of isolation as was recommended before the vaccination was available? Chip or Angela?
Let me let Angela do this one. I've been talking too much.
Yeah. So for the person who is shedding the virus, you do need to isolate and follow all the isolation recommendations. And that generally is a period of 10 days after your symptoms begin, or you get a test if you don't have symptoms, as long as you're improving. And the person providing your clinical support during your infection will give you detailed guidance on how long you need to isolate and when you should be released. For your exposures, individuals exposed to that person, there's a little bit of a difference if you're vaccinated or non-vaccinated. If you're unvaccinated, you should quarantine and stay in place until you've passed a period of 14 days. We usually say 10 days with a negative test on day 10 if you've been exposed. If you're vaccinated, what we recommend is that you mask more outdoors, keep your mask on, but you can move about in the community and be very mindful if you are with vulnerable individuals. In other words, don't see your friend who may have had a renal transplant and is on immunosuppressed drugs in that setting. You may just want to modify your behaviors for that window after exposure to be on the safer side. But you don't need to quarantine in place if you're vaccinated because of the significant benefit and protection of vaccination. Not 100%, but significant reduction in the likelihood of acquiring an infection after an exposure. Hope that helps.
All right, thank you, Angela. Okay, so Terry, questions for you. We've seen several questions coming up today related to events. So what are the current rules around staff meeting in person on site? What about off-site? And will these be the same for the fall quarter?
So again, one of those future questions, I don't know. That's a short answer. We're working on it, right? So as it relates to in-person events, we've been getting a lot of those questions in our personal mailboxes and then in the RTL mailboxes, et cetera. There's no change right now, but understand that we are meeting multiple times a week to refine that guidance and information. We know that people have questions as more folks are returning on campus about how many folks can we have in a meeting? Can we have food? Because that's a way that we've all come together as a community to break bread, but is it safe and all of that? So more information will be forthcoming because I know that question is out there. You should know that this isn't one of those things where it's like sort of an HR decision more than this is something that's really led by the science and what makes sense from a safety perspective as we're engaged in all of these assessments and what the definition of an event is, right? So some folks are like, well, it's only 10 people in my meeting, or there's only 15 people in my meeting, or, you know, what's the threshold to signify an event versus a meeting, et cetera. So we will provide more information on that actually very soon because the flurry of questions is coming in fast and furious, and we want to make sure that people know kind of how to operate as they're going forward together. So stay tuned is the short answer.
All right, thank you, Terry. All right, question for Angela. How long will we need to continue submitting the daily screening survey? And maybe you can also provide some context. I've seen this question come up over the past couple months. So maybe some context about why.
Yeah, I think we're going to need to keep doing the daily symptom screener because as we've discussed, mild symptoms can be a sign that you're shedding the virus. So we want those people with mild symptoms to actually get a test, make sure they're not infected before they're coming onto campus. So I actually don't think the daily symptom screener is going to be disappearing. Whether we tweak it a little because of the mandate, and if it helps with any of the behaviors, we're looking at all of that. But I'd be prepared to do daily symptom screening. I think it's good practice.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so let's see. Okay, question for you, Terry, related to remote work. Are remote hybrid work arrangements for return to campus evaluated individually or collectively for the whole department?
That's a mixed question. So they're generally evaluated individually by the work being performed by the employee. So there may be a group of employees who all perform the same work, and so they may all be evaluated initially as a collective. So it really kind of depends on the operation in that perspective. But when people are looking at what decisions to be made, they don't sort of just make a generalized department decision and not look at the individual employees and the work that they bring to the organization and what those operational needs might then implicate. They have to do kind of a phased in approach, right? Like organizationally, what is our thought process? And then within our VC, what is the rubric and the guidelines and understanding? And so then within that, what is the mission of our department? What do we do? Who do we support? Who are our clients? That kind of thing, and sort of work your way inward from there, and then provide the option or options to the employees to the extent that that makes sense. Have those discussions and then formalize with the appropriate work arrangement and the agreement documentation required.
Okay, cool. Thanks for an overview of that process, Terry. Always good to get a peek behind the curtain about how decisions are being made, and good to get that information. So we're just about at our time. So a final question has come in for me, which is exciting. And this question is, will virtual staff town halls continue into the future, even past the pandemic? And the answer to that is yes. We have seen that these are such a valuable vehicle. The participation has been really incredible. I think even just looking at the Q&A box and the questions coming in, I mean, it's great to have this ability to dialogue. And what I see happening is as long as we need to have these vehicles as a place to come together as a staff community to provide this really timely information about the pandemic and about return to campus, finding these connections with our experts at UC San Diego Health, that's what we use this time for. Eventually, maybe when that balance shifts and we're not spending so much time on those topics, I think it'll open up the door for us to talk about other cool things in our staff community, highlighting events and services and cool stuff happening on campus and opportunities for training and growth and all sorts of things. So I think we'll keep an eye out on that balance of what is it that UC San Diego staff need to know right now. But yes, the answer is yes. We found these to be a great opportunity for us to come together as a staff community. So thank you for that question. And with that, we're going to wrap up today. So I think we covered a lot of ground. I want to say thank you, as always, to our panelists. It's so great to have access to kind of the answers to our questions just right here in front of us, to have from experts in our community. So thank you very much for participating today, and we will see you at our staff town hall next month. Enjoy the rest of your day.